The dust of the great arena clung to Anya's worn tunic, a gritty shroud for her humiliation. It tasted of failure. Around her, the Dustfang pack jeered, their voices a tidal wave of contempt that crashed over her small frame. She kept her eyes fixed on the cracked earth at her feet, refusing to look at her alpha, her family, or the pitying face of her sister, Seraphina. She was 20 years old, and on the day of her final presentation, her wolf had not come. Again. Wolfless! Someone spat from the crowd, the word a venomous dart. Useless! An omega curse upon this pack. Alpha Gregor, a brute with a scarred face and eyes like chips of granite, stepped forward. His shadow fell over her, cold and absolute. Anya of the House of Stonecrest. You have failed the final trial. You bring shame to your lineage and weakness to our ranks. By the old laws, you are no longer Dustfang. The finality of his words was a physical blow, no longer Dustfang. It meant exile. It meant death in the unforgiving sun-scorched plains that surrounded their territory. Her breath hitched, a pathetic little sound in the vast hostile silence that had fallen. She could feel her father's burning shame from the stands, her mother's silent weeping. Seraphina, her perfect warrior sister, stood ramrod straight, her expression a mask of duty that couldn't quite hide her sorrow. Anya's hands, calloused from years of tending the pack's meager herb gardens, trembled at her sides. That was all she was good for. Coaxing life from stubborn soil, understanding the whispers of root and leaf. It was a soft magic, a quiet skill in a world that only valued the sharp cry of the hunt and the strength of the shift. Her healing salves were accepted, but the hands that made them were scorned. "Alpha, please," she whispered, the words tearing from her throat. She hated the weakness in her own voice, the desperation that made her crawl when she wanted to rage. "I can still serve the pack. My tinctures, my knowledge of the roots." Gregor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "We have warriors, not weed pickers. Your dabbling is a woman's pastime, not a contribution. We need teeth and claws, not petals and prayers." He gestured to the two hulking enforcers at his side. "Take her to the edge of the territory. Leave her for the buzzards." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her shame. This was it. The end. She risked a glance up, her gaze sweeping across the hostile faces, and a profound, aching loneliness settled in her soul. No one would speak for her. No one would stand against the Alpha's decree. She was nothing. "Please," she begged, sinking to her knees in the dust. The ultimate posture of submission. Humiliation burned her cheeks, but survival was a primal instinct that overrode pride. "Please don't cast me out." It was then that the horns blew. Not the horns of the pack, but the deep, resonant call of the high pass, a sound that struck fear and reverence into the heart of every shifter in the territory. It was the signal of a royal arrival. Alpha Gregor froze, his sneer wiped from his face and replaced with a mask of tense deference. The entire arena turned as one, their gazes fixed on the massive gates of the stronghold. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. He was here, the Alpha King. King Ronan ruled all the packs of the northern wastes, a monarch of myth and terror. He was said to be a giant of a man, with a temper as volatile as the winter storms. He rarely left his obsidian spire, the jagged fortress carved into the heart of a dead volcano, and his visits were never for pleasantries. They were for tribute, for judgment, for reminders of who held absolute power. The gates swung open, and a procession of guards in polished black armor marched in, their movements precise and unnerving. They flanked a figure who dwarfed them all. King Ronan was even more imposing than the legends claimed. He was impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His black hair was long, tied back from a face that looked as if it were carved from granite and fury. His eyes, a piercing shade of silver, swept over the arena, missing nothing, assessing everything. A collective shiver went through the Dustfang pack. This was a predator of a different magnitude. He moved with a fluid grace that was terrifying in a man of his size. He didn't walk, he stalked. His gaze landed on the scene in the center of the arena, Alpha Gregor standing over the kneeling, dust-covered form of Anya. Alpha Gregor. King Ronan's voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together in the deep earth. It held no warmth, only power. You are in the middle of a judgment. Gregor bowed low, the picture of submission. Your Majesty, an internal matter. A wolfless Omega shaming my pack. I am merely cleansing our ranks. The king's silver eyes flickered down to Anya. For a single, breathtaking moment their gazes met. She expected to see contempt, or at the very least, indifference. Instead, she saw something else. A flicker of confusion, a deep, unsettling stillness. It was as if he were looking not at her, but through her, sensing something hidden deep within. A strange, inexplicable calm washed over her own panic, a fragile peace that made no sense. Ronan was silent for a long moment, the tension in the arena stretching taut enough to snap. He took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving Anya. He felt it, a faint, almost imperceptible hum in the air around her, a soothing balm against the constant gnawing pain that lived under his skin. It was like the barest hint of spring after a brutal, endless winter. What was this? The tribute, Ronan said, his voice cutting through the silence. I have come for the annual tribute. Gregor straightened, relieved to be on more familiar ground. Of course, Your Majesty. The gold has been weighed. Our finest warriors are ready to pledge their swords to your service. Ronan's eyes remained on Anya. I do not want your gold this year, Gregor. And I have no need of your brutish warriors. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Alpha Gregor's brow furrowed. My king? Suddenly the Alpha King stood tall, his full, intimidating presence crashing down on them all. He raised a hand and pointed a single black-gloved finger directly at the Omega girl trembling in the dust. I will take her. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the jeering crowd was struck dumb, their mouths agape. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief and terror. Him? The terrifying Alpha King? He wanted her? Alpha Gregor stared, his face a comical mask of confusion. Her, Your Majesty? She is nothing. A wolfless Omega, barren, useless. She is worth less than the dust on your boots. King Ronan's silver eyes narrowed, and a palpable wave of cold fury emanated from him. Gregor physically flinched, taking a step back. I did not ask for your assessment of her worth, Alpha. Ronan's voice was dangerously quiet. I told you my price. She is my tribute. No one argued with the Alpha King. No one dared. Gregor, his face pale, swallowed hard and gave a jerky nod. As you command, Your Majesty. One of the king's royal guard stepped forward. He was a mountain of a man, second only to the king himself, with a calm, steady face and a thick, graying beard. He offered a hand to Anya. She stared at it, her mind a whirlwind. An hour ago, she was facing death by exile. Now she was facing something else entirely. Something unknown and infinitely more intimidating. Hesitantly, she placed her small, dirt-stained hand into the guard's massive one. He pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. She stumbled, her legs weak. She didn't dare look at the king again. Instead, her eyes found her family in the stands. Her father wouldn't meet her gaze. Her mother was weeping openly, and Serafina. For the first time, Anya saw not pity in her sister's eyes, but fear. Fear for her. "My name is Gideon," the guard said, his voice a low, reassuring rumble beside her ear. "You will come with us." He led her away from the center of the arena, away from the life she had always known. The pack parted before them like a disturbed sea, their faces a mixture of shock, scorn, and a new, grudging respect. She was no longer just the wolfless Omega, she was the king's property. As they reached the procession, King Ronan turned to follow. He paused and looked back at Alpha Gregor. "Your pack is weak, Gregor," he stated, the words a cold judgment. "You value brawn over substance. You discard what you do not understand. That is the mark of a fool, not a leader." Without another word, he swept past them, his long black cloak swirling like a storm cloud. Anya was hustled into the center of the guard formation, a tiny, bewildered figure surrounded by giants in black steel. The gates of the Dustfang stronghold closed behind them, shutting her out forever. The journey to the obsidian spire was a blur. They rode hard and fast, the royal guards moving with an efficiency that was both incredible and terrifying. Anya was given a horse, a skittish creature that seemed to sense her unease. Gideon rode beside her, a silent, watchful presence. The king rode at the head of the column, a solitary, forbidding figure who never looked back. She tried to understand what was happening. Why had he chosen her? It made no sense. She had nothing to offer a man like him. No political power, no wealth, no physical strength. Her only skill was in the earth, in the quiet language of plants. It was a skill her own people had deemed worthless. Why would a king see it any differently? As they traveled, the landscape changed. The dusty, sun-baked plains of her home gave way to jagged hills and shadowed forests. The air grew colder, sharper. And then she saw it. The obsidian spire. It wasn't a castle. It was a wound in the sky. A single massive shard of black volcanic rock that clawed at the clouds. It was unnatural, a monument to raw, brutal power. Lights flickered in its high windows like malevolent stars. A sense of dread, deeper and colder than anything she had felt in the arena, settled into her bones. This was his home. His prison? Upon their arrival, the massive gates of the fortress groaned open. They entered a courtyard paved with the same black stone, the air thick with the faint, acrid smell of sulfur. Servants scurried out to take the horses, their heads bowed, their eyes averted from the king. No one spoke. The entire fortress seemed to be holding its breath. King Ronan dismounted in one fluid motion. He finally turned and looked at her, his silver eyes unreadable. "Gideon," he commanded, "take her to the west wing, the greenhouses. See that she has what she needs." He turned and strode into the fortress without a backward glance, disappearing into the oppressive gloom. The greenhouses. Anya's mind latched onto the word. It was the only familiar concept in this terrifying new world. Gideon led her through echoing stone corridors, their footsteps the only sound. The fortress was a labyrinth of shadows and cold stone, decorated with grim tapestries of ancient battles. It felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Finally, he stopped before a set of tall, iron-framed doors, the glass panes coated with years of grime. "The king wishes for you to restore this place," Gideon explained, his voice softer now that they were away from the others. "It has been neglected for a long time. You will have access to whatever supplies you require. You will be housed in the adjoining chambers. You are not a prisoner, but you are not to leave this wing without my escort. Do you understand?" Anya could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. He pushed the heavy doors open, and she stepped inside, and gasped. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, a vast cavernous space that must have once been magnificent. But now it was a graveyard of plants. Dead vines clung to the walls like skeletal fingers. Pots were overturned. The dry, dead soil spilled across the flagstones. The air was stale with the smell of decay. In the center of the ruin, a single magnificent fountain stood silent, its basin choked with dead leaves. Yet, even amidst the decay, there was a glimmer of hope. A stubborn patch of ivy still clung to life in one corner. A single, pale moon-petal blossom pushed its way through a crack in the stone, its luminescence a frail defiance against the gloom. "Why?" Anya whispered, turning to Gideon. "Why does he want this place restored?" Gideon's expression was carefully neutral, but she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Sadness, perhaps. The Queen, his mother, loved this place. It was her sanctuary. Since her death, no one has been able to make anything grow here. He looked at her then, a long, searching look. "The king has his reasons for bringing you here. He does not act without purpose." With a final nod, he left her, the great doors closing behind him with a soft click. Anya was alone in the beautiful dead garden, a forgotten omega in a forgotten place, the property of a terrifying king whose motives were as dark and shadowed as his fortress. Anya stood in the center of the desolate greenhouse, the silence pressing in on her. The weight of her new reality was a physical pressure in her chest. She was a tribute, a thing taken to satisfy a king's whim. But as she looked around at the skeletal remains of what was once a vibrant sanctuary, a flicker of something other than fear sparked within her. A challenge. She walked slowly through the aisles, her fingers trailing over brittle, lifeless stems. She could feel the echoes of what had been, a faint whisper of life still clinging to the soil. This place wasn't dead. It was sleeping. It was wounded, just like its master. The thought came unbidden, surprising her. The king. In his eyes she had seen not just power, but a deep, profound pain. A loneliness that mirrored her own. It was a foolish, dangerous thought, but it took root. Her adjoining chambers were simple but clean, a stark contrast to the opulence and decay of the rest of the fortress. There was a bed, a small table, and a wash basin. A fresh set of plain gray tunics and trousers had been laid out for her. Practical, serviceable clothes. Workers' clothes. It was a relief. She wouldn't know how to exist in silks and jewels. For the first few days, she saw no one but the silent servant who brought her meals and Gideon, who checked on her once a day. He provided her with everything she asked for. Tools, fresh soil, seeds from the castle's stores. He answered her questions about the greenhouse's mechanics, the irrigation channels, the cleverly designed shades, but offered no information about the king. Anya lost herself in the work. It was her shield and her salvation. She started by clearing the dead things, her hands moving with practiced certainty. She swept the floors, cleaned the grimy glass until sunlight, pale and watery though it was, could stream through. She unblocked the fountain, and soon the gentle sound of trickling water filled the space, a soft heartbeat in the silence. With every weed she pulled, with every pot she filled with rich, dark earth, a piece of her own despair was tilled under. This was what she knew. This was where she had value, even if no one else could see it. She hummed old folk songs as she worked, her low, quiet voice a strange new sound in the long, silent hall of glass. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and rose, she was tending to the single, resilient moon-petal bloom. It was a rare, magical plant, known for its soothing properties. Its petals glowed with a soft, internal light. As she gently cleared the debris from its base, she felt it, a presence. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. He was standing in the shadows by the entrance, a towering silhouette against the fading light. King Ronan. She hadn't heard him approach. He moved with the silence of a predator. She didn't know how long he had been watching her. Her first instinct was to drop into a submissive bow, but she was rooted to the spot, her hand hovering over the glowing flower. He stepped out of the shadows, his heavy boots making no sound on the stone floor. He looked different without his armor and heavy cloak. He wore a simple black tunic, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, revealing powerfully corded forearms laced with faint silvery scars. His silver eyes were fixed on her, his expression intense and unreadable. "You have been busy," he said. His voice was still that low, intimidating rumble, but here, in the quiet of the greenhouse, it sounded less like a threat and more like the distant roll of thunder. "Your Majesty," she managed, her voice a reedy whisper. She forced herself to curtsy, her knees trembling. "Stand up," he commanded, though not unkindly. He walked closer, his gaze sweeping over the cleared plots, the neatly stacked pots, the clean glass. He stopped a few feet away from her, his attention settling on the moon petal in her hand. "My mother planted that. It is the only thing that has bloomed in this place in 10 years. Anya found a sliver of courage. It is strong, my lord. It just needed room to breathe." A strange expression flickered across his face. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and she felt that same unsettling sensation as in the arena, as if he were seeing something deep inside her. The air between them grew thick, charged with an unspoken current. She could feel the immense power coiled within him, a tightly controlled storm. But beneath it, she could also feel the tremors, the deep, unrelenting pain. He reached out, his large calloused hand moving towards the moon petal. Anya flinched back instinctively, a small, scared movement. His hand stopped in midair. A shadow crossed his features, a flicker of something that looked like hurt. He drew his hand back, clenching it into a fist at his side. "The scent," he said, his voice strained. "It is calming." It was more than calming. For a man like Ronan, who lived every moment on the edge of a razor, fighting a battle no one could see, the pure, untainted essence of the moon petal was a momentary truce. The faint, soothing aura Anya herself radiated amplified it, creating a small pocket of peace in his personal hell. That was why he'd taken her. It was a desperate, instinctual gamble. He had felt her presence across a crowded arena, a whisper of relief to his tormented soul. "Many of the night-blooming flowers have that quality, my lord," she offered softly, trying to fill the tense silence. "They are meant to soothe the moon's madness." His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and piercing. "What do you know of madness?" he asked, the question low and dangerous. Anya's blood ran cold. She had overstepped. "Nothing, Your Majesty." "Forgive me. It is just an old saying." He stared at her for a long, unnerving moment. She could see the war within him, the conflict in his silver eyes. He looked like a man trapped in his own skin. He took a half step back, putting distance between them again. The torment in his expression was so profound it made her own heart ache in sympathy. "Continue your work," he commanded, his voice once again clipped and formal. "I expect this garden to live again." Then, as silently as he had appeared, he was gone, melting back into the shadows of his fortress. Anya was left with a trembling heart and the soft, glowing light of the moon petal. She had seen a glimpse behind the monster's mask, and she had seen a vulnerability that terrified her more than his strength ever could. The king's visit set a new pattern. He would appear at dusk, a silent specter amidst the growing greenery. He never spoke much, content to stand in the shadows and watch her work. His presence was a heavy weight in the air, a constant, unnerving pressure. Yet, Anya found herself growing accustomed to it. She learned to feel his approach, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a prickling on her skin. She continued her work, pouring all her focus into the soil. She planted herbs known for their calming properties: lavender, chamomile, silverleaf. The greenhouse began to transform. Green shoots pushed through the dark earth. The scent of life began to overpower the smell of decay. The fountain gurgled cheerfully. It was becoming a sanctuary again. And as the garden healed, she noticed a change in him. The rigid line of his shoulders seemed to relax, just a fraction. The permanent clench of his jaw would sometimes soften as he inhaled the fragrant air. These were minuscule changes, almost imperceptible, but Anya, who had spent her life observing the subtle signs of growth and distress in plants, saw them clearly. Her curiosity about him grew into a quiet, dangerous obsession. Who was this man, this king of sorrows? What was the source of the pain that radiated from him in waves? Gideon remained a locked vault, polite and helpful, but utterly impenetrable on the subject of his king. One afternoon, another visitor appeared at the greenhouse doors. He was an older man, leaner than the other shifters she'd seen, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a thin, cruel mouth. He was dressed in robes of fine velvet, a stark contrast to the functional attire of the king and his guards. He introduced himself as Lord Vorlog, the king's uncle and regent of the council. "So, you are the little weed picker my nephew has taken such a strange interest in," Vorlog said, his voice smooth and condescending. He circled her, his eyes cataloging her plain clothes and dirt-stained hands with disdain. "I must confess, I do not see the appeal." Anya stiffened, her hand tightening on her trowel. "I am restoring the Queen's garden, my lord, at the king's command." "Ah, yes." A sentimental project. Vorlog waved a dismissive hand. "Ronan has always had a weakness for his mother's memory. It is unbecoming of a king. A king should be focused on strength, on alliances, on producing an heir. Not on wilting flowers." His gaze sharpened. "Tell me, little Omega, what are your true intentions here? What spell have you cast on him?" "I have cast no spell," Anya said, her voice shaking slightly. "I am a gardener." "Are you?" he purred, stepping closer. "Or are you a parasite, feeding on his grief? Know this: the king is a tool of the state. His purpose is to be strong, to lead our people. Any distraction will be removed. Do you understand my meaning?" The threat was unmistakable, a cold blade pressed against her throat. He saw her not as a person, but as a complication, a variable in his political equations. "I only do as the king commands," she repeated, her voice firmer this time. Vorlog smiled, a chilling, humorless expression. "For now. But kings can be guided for their own good." He glanced around the thriving greenhouse, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "See that you remember your place." He swept out, leaving a trail of cold malice in his wake. Anya's hands trembled. She had an enemy, a powerful one. Lord Vorlog didn't just dislike her, he saw her, and the small pocket of peace she was creating, as a threat to his own power and his vision for the kingdom. That night, the king did not appear at his usual time. A storm raged outside the spire, rattling the glass panes of the greenhouse. Anya felt a strange sense of unease, a premonition of dread that had nothing to do with Vorlog's visit. The air in the castle felt different, charged with a dark, frantic energy. Unable to sleep, she worked late, repotting a collection of nightshade ferns. Past midnight she heard it, a sound that was not part of the storm, a low, guttural growl of agony, followed by the splintering crash of wood. It came from the direction of the king's private chambers, further down the west wing. Fear warred with a strange, compelling instinct to help. She thought of the pain in his eyes, the torment she saw lurking just beneath the surface. Something was terribly wrong. Clutching a small pouch of crushed moon petal leaves, Their scent was a comfort. She crept out of the greenhouse. The corridor was dark and empty. She followed the sounds, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. The crashing grew louder, accompanied by a pained snarl that was not entirely human. She reached the massive oak doors of the king's chambers. They were slightly ajar, one hinge torn from its mount. A low, rhythmic panting, thick with pain, came from within. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was a wreck. A heavy table was overturned, its contents scattered. Tapestries were torn from the walls, and in the center of the room, illuminated by a sliver of moonlight from a high window, was the source of the destruction. It was him, and it was not. King Ronan was on his hands and knees, his broad back arched in agony. His body was convulsing, caught in a horrific, violent transformation. His skin seemed to ripple, darkening to a shade of charcoal and soot. His form elongated, joints cracking and popping with sounds that made Anya's stomach churn. Black, shadowy fur sprouted from his skin, coarse and unnatural. His hands were no longer hands, but massive claws digging deep gouges into the stone floor. He threw his head back and roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated torment. It was a cry torn between man and beast, a soul being ripped apart. This was his secret, his curse, the reason for his isolation, for the pain in his eyes. He wasn't just a werewolf. He was something more, something broken. Anya's blood ran cold with terror. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee from the monster that was consuming the king. But she couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the floor, because through the monstrous agony she could see him. She could see the man, his human consciousness fighting a losing battle against the feral darkness that was overwhelming him. His head snapped around, and his eyes, now glowing with a malevolent silver light, locked onto her. He wasn't seeing her, not Anya. He was seeing a threat, an intruder in his territory of pain. A low, predatory growl rumbled in his chest, a promise of violence. He lunged. Anya didn't scream. There was no time. She reacted on pure instinct, the instinct of a healer, not a fighter. She threw the pouch of crushed moon petal leaves at him. The fine, glowing dust burst in the air between them, a cloud of calming, silvery light. The Beast King skidded to a halt, shaking his massive head as if to clear it. He snarled, confused, the scent of the moon petal cutting through the red haze of his rage. It didn't stop him, but it gave her a precious second. In that second, she didn't run away. She ran towards him. "Ronan!" she cried out, his name a desperate plea. The sound of his name, spoken in her voice, seemed to pierce through the monstrous shell. The glowing eyes flickered, and for a heartbeat, she saw the man again, his expression one of horrified shock. He was aware. He was trapped inside the beast, watching himself about to tear apart the one source of peace he had found. The battle within him was terrible to behold. The monstrous form shuddered, one clawed hand rising, then falling. He roared again, but this time it was a sound of frustration, of self-loathing. "Stay. Back," he growled, the words mangled and distorted, forced through a throat no longer entirely human. "It will kill you." "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. She took another step closer, her hand outstretched. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell, old pack magic that the warriors had long since forgotten. Magic that spoke of balance, of soothing the feral spirit, not conquering it. She began to hum. It was a simple, ancient lullaby, a melody her mother used to sing to calm her as a child. It was a song of the earth, of the quiet strength of growing things. Her voice, small and clear, filled the wrecked chamber. The effect on the beast was immediate and profound. The violent trembling eased. The guttural snarls softened into pained whimpers. He sank back on his haunches, his monstrous head cocked, the glowing silver eyes fixed on her. The raw killing intent began to recede, replaced by a deep, aching confusion. The calm in her own heart spread outwards, a tangible wave of peace. It was her gift, her curse, the thing that made her a poor shifter but a powerful empath. It was the very essence of her being, and it was reaching the trapped man inside the monster. The shadows clinging to his form seemed to loosen their grip. The transformation began to reverse, but this time it was slower, less violent. The coarse fur receded. The claws shrank back into hands. The distorted features softened, returning to the harsh, handsome lines of his human face. Finally, he collapsed onto the floor, fully human again, naked and shaking. He was covered in a sheen of sweat, his body trembling with the aftershocks of the ordeal. Deep, bleeding gouges from his own claws marred the stone floor around him. Anya rushed forward, falling to her knees beside him. She grabbed a torn tapestry from the floor and gently draped it over his shivering form. He looked up at her, his silver eyes wide with a raw, soul-bearing vulnerability. The mask was gone. The king was gone. All that was left was a man, broken and ashamed. "You saw," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I saw," she confirmed softly. He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping to trace a path through the grime on his cheek. "Everyone who sees, runs." "I'm still here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out, her hand hesitating for a moment before she gently placed it on his arm. His skin was feverishly hot. At her touch, a shudder went through him, but it wasn't one of pain. It was a tremor of profound, bone-deep relief. In that moment, the world shifted. The space between them crackled with an energy that had nothing to do with curses or kingship. It was ancient and elemental. He opened his eyes and looked at her, and this time, the recognition was absolute. He saw her, the other half of his soul, the anchor in his storm. "Mate," he breathed, the word a reverent, broken whisper. Anya's breath caught. Mate. The word every shifter dreamed of, the sacred, fated bond that completed them. She felt it then, the undeniable pull towards him, a golden thread that had been humming beneath the surface all along, now singing a triumphant song. It wasn't just his pain she had sensed, it was the call of her own soul reaching for its counterpart. He reached up, his hand shaking, and gently cupped her cheek. His touch was electric, sending a jolt of warmth through her entire body. All the fear, all the uncertainty, melted away, replaced by a fierce, protective certainty. But the moment of connection was shattered by a sharp, authoritative voice from the doorway. "What is the meaning of this?" They both turned. Lord Vorlag stood in the ruined doorway, flanked by 2 guards. His eyes took in the scene with cold, calculating precision. The wrecked room, the naked, vulnerable king on the floor, and the Omega girl kneeling beside him, her hand on his arm. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Vorlag's thin lips. He had found it. The king's weakness. Ronan immediately tried to sit up, his muscles screaming in protest. He pulled the tapestry tighter around himself, a futile attempt to regain some semblance of royal dignity. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury, but the exhaustion and vulnerability still clung to him like a shroud. "Vorlag," Ronan's voice was a low growl. "Get out." Vorlag ignored him, his sharp eyes fixed on Anya. "I knew you were a corrupting influence. Look what you have done. You have brought the king low, reduced him to this." He gestured around the wrecked room with a theatrical sweep of his hand. "This has nothing to do with her," Ronan snapped, forcing himself to his feet. He swayed, and Anya instinctively reached out to steady him. Vorlag's eyes narrowed at the gesture. On the contrary, nephew, Vorlag said, his voice dripping with false concern. It has everything to do with her. The curse has been manageable for years. You have kept it contained. But since her arrival, you have become distracted, sentimental. Your control is clearly slipping. The kingdom cannot be ruled by a man who is slave to a monster. The word monster hung in the air, a deliberate poisoned dart. Ronan flinched as if struck. Guards, Vorlag commanded, his voice sharp. Escort the Omega to the dungeons. She is a threat to the stability of the crown. No! Ronan's roar shook the very stones of the room. He took a protective step in front of Anya, shielding her with his body. The sheer force of his alpha command washed over the guards, making them hesitate. You will not touch her. She is under my protection. Your protection. Vorlag laughed, a dry, rasping sound. You cannot even protect yourself. Look at you. You are weak, exposed. For the good of the kingdom, I am relieving you of your duties until you are, well, again. The council will agree. They will see that my regency is the only logical course. It was a coup. A carefully orchestrated power play, and Anya had just handed him the perfect excuse. He had likely been waiting for a moment like this, a moment of ultimate weakness, for years. Before Ronan could respond, Gideon burst into the room, his sword drawn. He took in the scene in a flash. Ronan, Anya, Vorlag, the guards. And his loyalty was absolute. He placed himself at Ronan's side, his blade leveled at Vorlag. My lord Vorlag, Gideon's voice was iron, you are speaking treason. I am speaking sense, Captain, Vorlag retorted smoothly. Our king is unwell. He is a danger to himself and others. Would you have the entire kingdom know that their ruler is a rabid beast who destroys his own chambers? Would you see our enemies on the southern border learn of this weakness? He was twisting the truth, painting Ronan's curse not as a burden to be borne, but as a disqualifying flaw. He was using Ronan's deepest shame as a political weapon. Ronan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Anya could feel the violent struggle within him. The beast, the shadow beast as he called the curse, was stirring again, roused by the threat to his mate and his throne. A low growl rumbled in his chest, and for a second, his eyes flickered with that dangerous silver light. Anya placed a hand on his back. Ronan, she whispered, her voice a calming anchor. Don't. That's what he wants. Her touch, her voice, cut through his rage. He took a shuddering breath, forcing the beast back down. The effort cost him, leaving him pale and trembling. Seeing this, Vorlag pressed his advantage. You see? He is unstable. For his own safety and for hers, they must be separated. He nodded to his guards. Take her. This time, the guards moved. They were Vorlag's men, their loyalty bought and paid for. Gideon moved to intercept them, but he was outnumbered. Ronan made a choice. In that split second, he chose to protect Anya above all else, even his pride, even his crown. He knew he couldn't fight them all in his weakened state, not as a man. Gideon, he said, his voice strained but clear. Take her to the greenhouse. Bar the doors. Let no one enter. My king, I cannot leave you, Gideon protested. That is an order, Ronan roared, putting every last ounce of his alpha authority into the command. Gideon, bound by his oath, gritted his teeth and nodded. He grabbed Anya's arm. Come, he said urgently. No, I won't leave him, Anya cried, trying to pull away. Ronan met her eyes over the chaos. The desperation, the love, the terror in his gaze was a silent scream. Go, he mouthed. Please. Gideon didn't give her a choice. He half dragged, half carried her from the room, pushing past Vorlag's stunned guards. Vorlag let them go, a smug smile on his face. He had what he wanted, the king, alone and vulnerable. As Gideon pulled her down the corridor, Anya looked back. She saw Vorlog's guards closing in on Ronan. She saw her mate, her king, standing alone against the man who would destroy him, his body braced for a fight he could not win. The great oak doors slammed shut, and the last thing she heard was the clash of steel. Gideon practically threw Anya into the greenhouse and slammed the heavy iron-framed doors behind them. He slid a massive iron bar into place, his movements economical and grim. The sound echoed in the vast glass-walled space like the tolling of a funeral bell. "He'll be killed," Anya whispered, her hands pressed against the cold glass of the door, as if she could see through the stone walls to where Ronan was. "We left him alone." "The king is not so easily defeated," Gideon said, but his voice lacked conviction. He ran a hand over his weary face. "But Vorlog has been planning this for a long time. He has allies on the council, shifters who believe in the old ways, who see the king's compassion as a weakness." "Compassion?" Anya turned, her eyes wide with disbelief. "The man I saw was filled with pain, not compassion." "You have only seen the shell he built to protect himself," Gideon said softly. "Before the curse worsened, before his father's death, Ronan was different. He believed in a united kingdom, one built on more than just fear and brute strength. Vorloj represents the past, a past of endless war and iron-fisted rule. He sees the king's vision, and now you, as a threat to that." Anya's mind raced. It all clicked into place. Vorlog didn't just want power, he wanted to drag the kingdom back into a dark age. And Ronan, with his secret agony, had been fighting not just a monster within, but a political viper in his own court. She looked around the greenhouse, her sanctuary, now her prison. The green living things she had nurtured seemed to mock her helplessness. Her skills were with healing, with life. What good were they against swords and treason? "What is the curse?" she asked, her voice quiet. "What is that thing inside him?" Gideon sighed, leaning his heavy frame against a stone workbench. "It is an old bloodline curse. The royal line is blessed with great power, but the price is a darkness that clings to the wolf spirit. For most, it is merely a shadow, a temper they must learn to control. But once in a generation, it manifests as the shadow beast. A feral, uncontrollable entity that feeds on pain and rage. It grows stronger over time, slowly consuming the man until nothing is left. Ronan's father succumbed to it. He had to be put down." The horror of his words settled on Anya like a physical weight. This was Ronan's future, a descent into madness, ending in death at the hands of his own men. His mother, the queen, was a healer, Gideon continued, his gaze distant. She was the only one who could soothe him. She used the plants in this garden. She believed she could find a cure, not just a balm, but she died before she could succeed. Anya's eyes were drawn to the center of the greenhouse, to the single magnificent moon petal plant, its blossoms glowing brighter in the encroaching gloom, the queen's work, her legacy. "A cure," Anya breathed. An impossible idea began to form in her mind, a desperate seed of hope. She was a healer. She understood the plants in a way no one else did. Perhaps the queen had left something behind, a clue. "Gideon," she said, her voice urgent, "did the queen keep records? A journal? Anything?" Gideon's brow furrowed in thought. "She had a small study, attached to her private chambers. It's been sealed since her death. It's just through there." He pointed to a small, unassuming wooden door at the back of the greenhouse, almost completely hidden by overgrown ivy. Anya didn't hesitate. She scrambled over to the door and pulled at the handle. It was locked. "Stand back," Gideon said, He drew a dagger from his belt and, with a few deft movements, prized the old lock open. The door swung inward with a groan of disuse, releasing a puff of stale, dusty air. The room was small and simple: a writing desk, a few chairs, and shelves upon shelves of books and scrolls. It was a scholar's room, not a queen's. Anya rushed to the desk. It was covered in scattered notes, diagrams of plants, and star charts. The queen had been researching not just botany, but astrology, trying to find a celestial alignment that might aid her work. Anya's fingers sifted through the parchments. Most of it was complex, far beyond her simple knowledge of herbal remedies. But then she found it: a small, leather-bound journal, tucked away in a drawer. The queen's handwriting was elegant, precise. She flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. It detailed years of research, countless failed experiments. But the last few pages were different. They were filled with a frantic, hopeful energy. The queen had found a potential answer. "The shadow beast is a corruption of the spirit," Anya read, her lips moving silently. "It cannot be destroyed, for it is part of him. But it can be tamed. It requires a ritual of balance, a powerful soothing agent to calm the beast, an anchor of pure emotional connection to strengthen the man, and a catalyst to bind them together." Her eyes scanned the page, finding the ingredients. The soothing agent was an elixir made from the heart of a fully bloomed moon petal, but one that had opened under the light of a blood moon. The catalyst was a sliver of obsidian from the heart of the spire itself. And the anchor. The anchor was the true mate's bond, freely and completely given in a moment of ultimate choice. Anya's blood ran cold. She looked at the star charts on the desk, her eyes tracing the celestial paths. According to the queen's meticulous calculations, there was a blood moon rising tonight. It was a chance. A terrifying, impossible, 1 in a million chance. "Gideon," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve, "I think I know how to save him." She held up the journal. "But I can't do it from in here." Gideon read the passage she indicated, his eyes widening. "This is old magic. Dangerous." "It's all we have," she insisted. "Vorlag wants to kill him or imprison him. He thinks Ronan is weak. He doesn't understand that the man fighting that beast every single day is the strongest person in this kingdom. We have to help him." Gideon looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, the healer's fire that had replaced the timid Omega's fear. He saw the same strength, the same desperate hope he had once seen in his queen. He made his decision. He walked to the main doors and, with a powerful heave, lifted the iron bar. "The council meets in the Great Hall," he said, his voice grim. "Vorlag will be putting the king on trial, trying to force an abdication. That is where we will find him." He drew his sword. "Stay behind me. And pray to the ancestors we are not too late." The Great Hall was a cavern of intimidation. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting long, dancing shadows up the stone walls. The leaders and elders of the vassal packs were assembled, their faces grim and uncertain. They sat at a massive circular stone table, in the center of which was a sunken pit. And in that pit stood King Ronan. He was clad only in simple trousers, his torso bare, revealing a roadmap of old scars mixed with fresh bruises from his capture. Heavy, enchanted chains, glowing with a faint blue light that suppressed shifter abilities, bound his wrists to the floor. He was a king on display, a beast in a cage for the council's judgment. Lord Vorlag stood at the head of the table, presiding over the grim spectacle. "You see before you the truth of our king," he announced, his voice echoing in the tense hall. "For years I have helped him conceal this affliction. But his control is gone. He is a danger. The shadow beast is winning. For the good of the kingdom, he must relinquish the throne." A murmur of agreement went through some of the older, more traditional alphas. They saw only the weakness Vorlog wanted them to see. Ronan stood tall, his defiance a palpable force despite the chains. "This is not a trial," he said, his voice raw but steady. "This is a power grab, Vorlog. You prey on their fear because you have nothing else to offer. You want to lead them back to an age of darkness and blood." "I want to lead them to strength," Vorlog countered. "Something you have lost. You were so weakened, you let a wolfless Omega cloud your judgment, a creature who should have been cast out as refuse." At the mention of Anya, a feral growl escaped Ronan's lips. The chains flared with blue light as he strained against them, the beast within him fighting the magical suppression. It was at that moment that the great doors to the hall burst open. Gideon strode in, his sword in hand, a silent challenge to everyone present. And just behind him was Anya, her arms filled with a bundle from the greenhouse, her face pale but set with fierce determination. A gasp went through the assembly. Vorlog's face contorted with fury. "Seize them! They are traitors!" Gideon took a defensive stance in front of Anya. "The only traitor in this hall is you, Vorlog," he boomed. Ronan's head snapped up, his eyes locked on Anya, a look of pure terror on his face. "Anya, no! Get out of here!" he yelled, rattling his chains. He didn't want her to see him like this. He didn't want her anywhere near the danger. She ignored him, her gaze fixed on the high, arched window at the far end of the hall. Through it, the moon was visible, a perfect glowing orb, already tinged with the crimson of the coming eclipse, the blood moon. "He is not weak?" Anya's voice rang out, clear and surprisingly strong. The alphas turned to look at her, this small, unassuming girl who dared to interrupt their council. "You see a curse, but I see a man who has fought a battle every day of his life to protect you all from it. A battle none of you would have the strength to endure. That is not weakness. That is true kingship." She walked forward, past Gideon's protective form. Vorlag's guards moved to intercept her, but she didn't even look at them. Her eyes were only for Ronan. "He has hidden his pain to keep you from fear," she continued, her voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. "He has shouldered this burden alone. Lord Vorlag sees this as an opportunity for power. I see it as proof that he is the only one worthy of the throne." Ronan stared at her, his heart aching. She was defending him. She was standing up for him in a way no one, not even himself, ever had. She saw him. She truly saw him. Vorlag sneered. "Touching words from a deluded girl. They will not save him. The beast is a part of him. It cannot be undone." "It does not need to be undone," Anya said, stopping at the edge of the pit. She looked down at Ronan. "It needs to be balanced." She knelt, placing her bundle on the floor. From it, she took the glowing moon petal, its luminescence now pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. She also produced a sharp obsidian shard and a small vial of viscous liquid. The elixir. Ronan's eyes widened as he realized what she was attempting. "Anya, don't. The ritual. My mother died trying to perfect it. It's too dangerous." "She didn't have all the components," Anya said, her gaze steady and full of a love so fierce it stole his breath. "She was missing one thing. The most important thing." The moon outside turned a deep bloody red. The light filtering into the hall bathed everything in an eerie crimson glow. The time was now. "Vorlag, stop her!" one of the old alphas yelled, rising to his feet. Vorlag drew his own sword, a cruel, serrated blade. "I told you she was a witch. She would see us all destroyed with her dark magic." He started towards her, his guards fanning out behind him. Gideon met their charge with a roar, his sword a blur of silver. He was a master swordsman, but he was outnumbered. He could not hold them for long. Anya ignored the chaos erupting around her. She uncorked the vial. The scent of the moon petal elixir filled the air, potent and overwhelmingly calming. She looked at Ronan, her heart in her eyes. "Trust me," she whispered. Then she did the unthinkable. She leaped down into the pit with him. She landed lightly on her feet just out of his reach. The alphas gasped. She was in the cage with the monster. "Anya!" Ronan's voice was a choked cry of desperation. He pulled against his chains, his muscles straining to the breaking point. "Drink this," she said, holding the vial to his lips. He turned his head away. "No. It will lower my defenses. The beast will break free. It will kill you," he pleaded. "No, it won't," she said with absolute certainty. "It will calm it. It will give you the chance to face it, not as a jailer, but as an equal." Above them, Gideon grunted in pain as a blade slipped past his guard, slicing his arm. He was being overwhelmed. Vorlage was closing in. Seeing the desperation, Ronan made his choice. He trusted her. He had trusted her from the moment he saw her in the arena. He opened his mouth, and she poured the shimmering liquid down his throat. The effect was instantaneous. The blue glow of the enchanted chains flickered and died. The magical suppression was neutralized by the elixir. Ronan roared, a sound of pure, untamed power, and with a surge of strength, he shattered the chains, the links exploding outwards. The transformation began instantly, accelerated by the blood moon and the sudden release of his power. It was faster, more violent than before. The shadow beast burst forth, no longer fighting against him, but erupting from him. It was larger, darker, its eyes burning with crimson light, mirroring the moon above. It stood on two legs, a terrifying hybrid of wolf and shadow, and it turned its burning gaze not on Vorlag, not on the terrified alphas, but on the small girl who stood before it, unafraid. The great hall fell into a deathly hush, broken only by the ragged panting of the shadow beast. It was a creature of nightmare, its form constantly shifting, shadows coiling around it like living smoke. The alphas at the table were frozen in terror, their bravado forgotten. Vorlag himself took a hesitant step back, his smug confidence replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. He had wanted to expose a monster, but he had not anticipated unleashing a god of destruction. The beast lowered its massive head, sniffing the air around Anya. A low growl rumbled in its chest. It could feel the man, Ronan, trapped deep within, screaming for it to stop, to not harm her. But the beast's rage, fed by years of suppression and the agony of the curse, was a tidal wave. Anya stood her ground. She did not flinch, did not show fear. She held the glowing moon petal in one hand and the obsidian shard in the other. She looked into the beast's burning crimson eyes and spoke, not to the monster, but to the man inside. "Ronan, I am here. You are not alone in the darkness. I am your anchor. Hold on to me." The beast snarled, confused by her lack of fear, by the soothing aura that pushed back against its rage. It raised a clawed hand, the talons longer than daggers. "Finish it, you fool beast!" Vorlag screamed, recovering his nerve. "Kill the witch!" His shout broke the spell. The beast's head snapped towards him, its rage finding a new target. It forgot Anya for a moment and lunged, not at Vorlag, but at the edge of the pit, preparing to leap out and slaughter everyone in the hall. This was the moment, the ultimate choice. Ronan, his consciousness a tiny flicker in the storm of the beast's fury, had a choice. He could let the beast loose, let it tear Vorlag apart. Let it destroy all the alphas who had judged him, who had feared him. It would be so easy to give in to the rage, to let the darkness consume everything. Or he could fight, not by suppressing the beast, but by directing it, by protecting the one thing that mattered more than his anger, more than his revenge, more than his own life. He chose her. With a monumental effort of will that transcended the physical, Ronan fought for control. He couldn't stop the beast, but he could steer it. He forced the rampaging creature to turn away from its path of destruction and look back at Anya. He forced it to see her not as a threat, but as the one thing to be protected. The shadow beast roared in frustration, fighting its own instincts. It was a war waged on a spiritual plane, made manifest in the creature's shuddering form. Anya saw her chance. While the beast was internally conflicted, she moved. She pressed the glowing moon petal against its chest, right over its heart. The petals dissolved into pure light upon contact, sinking into the shadowy fur, a wave of profound, magical peace that went deeper than any elixir. The beast cried out, a sound that was half rage, half relief. The crimson glow in its eyes softened. Then she took the obsidian shard and, without hesitation, sliced her own palm. Blood welled up, dark in the crimson light. She pressed her bleeding hand against its chest, right where the moon petal had vanished. "My bond is yours," she declared, her voice ringing with power. "My life is yours. My love is yours. We are mated. We are one. You are not a monster. You are my king." The final component of the ritual clicked into place. The soothing agent of the flower, the catalyst of the obsidian-laced earth magic in her blood, and the anchor of the true mate's bond freely given. A blinding flash of silver light erupted from the beast's chest, engulfing them both. The alphas cried out, shielding their eyes. The light was not hot or destructive. It was pure, cleansing. When the light faded, the scene in the pit had changed. The monstrous form of the shadow beast was gone. Ronan stood in its place, on his own 2 feet. He was still himself, but different. His silver eyes now held a new depth. The shadows that had always clung to him were still there, but they no longer coiled with malice. They settled, becoming a part of him, a cloak of power he now wore instead of a cage of torment he inhabited. He could feel the beast, but it was no longer a separate, raging entity. It was quiet, listening. It was his. He looked at his hands, then at Anya. A slow, wondrous smile spread across his face. The pain was gone. The constant, gnawing agony that had been his companion since childhood had vanished, replaced by a deep, calm strength. He looked at the cut on her palm and gently took her hand in his. He lowered his head and licked the wound clean. A jolt of energy passed between them, and her skin sealed over, leaving not even a scar. The mating bond was complete. "Witchcraft!" Vorlog shrieked, his face pale with terror and disbelief. "She has ensorcelled him! Kill them both!" He charged forward, his sword raised, aiming for Anya's back. He never made it. Ronan moved faster than sight. He didn't shift, but the shadows around him solidified, forming a barrier. Vorlag's sword shattered against it. Ronan appeared before him, his hand grabbing Vorlag by the throat and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. "You are right about one thing, Uncle," Ronan said, his voice a deadly calm whisper that carried through the entire hall. His eyes glowed with a soft, controlled silver light. "She is a witch. She is my queen, and you have threatened her for the last time." With a flick of his wrist, there was a sickening crack. Vorlag's body went limp. Ronan dropped him to the floor like a sack of garbage. He turned to face the terrified council. He was no longer the chained, tormented king they had judged. He was something more, a perfect synthesis of man and beast, of light and shadow. He was complete. "I am your king," he declared, his voice resonating with absolute, unquestionable authority. He held up Anya's hand, their fingers intertwined. "And this is your queen. The age of fear is over. A new age of balance begins today. Anyone who disputes this will answer to me." He looked down at Anya, his silver eyes full of a love and gratitude so profound it was humbling. "You saved me," he whispered, "for her alone." No, she whispered back, her heart soaring. We saved each other. In the aftermath of Vorlag's death, a stunned silence held the great hall captive. The alphas and elders stared, not at the body of the traitor, but at their transformed king and the small woman whose hand he held. The raw power emanating from Ronan was undeniable, but it was different now. It was not the jagged, volatile energy of a man at war with himself, but the deep, resonant power of a mountain, solid and immovable. One by one, the alphas rose from their seats. Led by a grizzled old warrior from the Stormcrest pack, they knelt. It was not the fearful, coerced submission they had shown before. It was a gesture of true, earned fealty. They had witnessed not just a display of power, but a miracle of healing and love. They had seen a king reborn and a queen revealed. Ronan looked down at Anya, his mate, his savior. He saw the smudges of dirt on her cheek, the weariness in her eyes, and the unshakable strength that had called to him across a dusty arena. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of reverence in front of his entire court. "The council is dismissed," he said, his voice softening but losing none of its authority. "There is much to be done, a new era to build." Without waiting for a response, he swept Anya up into his arms. She gave a small cry of surprise, her arms instinctively going around his neck. He carried her from the great hall as if she weighed nothing, leaving Gideon to manage the stunned council and the grim task of cleaning up. He didn't take her to her chambers in the greenhouse wing. He carried her through the fortress, up winding stairs to the royal wing where she had found him in his agony. He strode into his chambers, the ones he had wrecked, and kicked the broken door shut. He set her down gently, his hands lingering on her waist. The room was still a disaster, a testament to the battle he had lost, and the one she had won for him. The moonlight, no longer blood red but a pure, clean silver, streamed through the window, illuminating them both. "I never thought," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "that I would ever feel quiet." Inside my own head, he touched his own chest, a look of wonder on his face. "The beast is there. I can feel him. But he is not raging. He is content." "He is home," Anya whispered, reaching up to cup his cheek. "You both are." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. The simple contact was an anchor, a reality more potent than any throne or crown. He had spent his entire life in isolation, terrified of what he was, terrified of hurting anyone who got too close. He had built walls of cruelty and indifference to keep the world at bay. And this small, wolfless Omega had walked through them all as if they were nothing but mist. "All my life," he said, opening his eyes, his silver gaze intense and serious, "I have been defined by my curse, by what I lacked. Control, peace, a future. You have given me everything." "You had the strength inside you all along, Ronan," she insisted. "I just gave you a reason to use it differently." He shook his head. "You gave me a reason to live, not just survive." He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "The bond. I feel you. It's like a song in my soul where there was only ever screaming." Anya's heart swelled. "I feel you too." A great, steady warmth. The air between them thickened, charged with the power of their newly completed bond. The fear and desperation of the battle faded, replaced by a deep, undeniable longing. He lowered his head, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Anya." He breathed her name like a prayer. She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was not a clash of passion, but a gentle, reverent meeting. It was a kiss of gratitude, of relief, of 1,000 unspoken conversations. It was the taste of sanctuary, the feeling of a long and terrible journey finally ending. He deepened the kiss, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her flush against his hard body. The gentleness gave way to a fierce, possessive passion, the culmination of a lifetime of loneliness and a destiny finally realized. He was a king claiming his queen, a man claiming his mate, his other half. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the moonlit air. "There will be a formal ceremony," he murmured against her skin, "before all the packs. They will all know you as their Luna Queen." "I don't need a ceremony, Ronan," she said honestly. "I don't need a crown. I just need you. And you will have me," he promised, his voice a solemn vow. "Always. But you deserve the crown. You saved the kingdom from more than just my curse. You saved it from Vorlag's hate. You showed them that true strength isn't in claws and teeth, but in here." He pressed a hand to her heart. "Your healing is what this land needs. It is what I need." In the days that followed, the obsidian spire began to change. The oppressive silence was replaced by a buzz of activity. Orders were sent to all the packs, calling their alphas to the spire for the royal union and the formal ascension of their new queen. The fortress itself seemed to breathe easier, the shadows less menacing. Anya, with the full resources of the kingdom now at her disposal, threw herself into her work. She didn't just restore the queen's greenhouse, she expanded it. She sent for seeds and cuttings from every corner of the kingdom, cultivating not just plants for beauty, but for healing. She began to train others, servants and guards alike, in the basics of herbalism, sharing the knowledge her pack had scorned. Ronan was by her side whenever his duties allowed. He would watch her, a look of quiet awe on his face, as she explained the properties of a certain root or the proper way to bind a poultice. He was healing too, not just from the curse but from the years of isolation. He started to speak with his counsel, not with commands, but with questions. He listened, he learned. He began to rule not just with power, but with the wisdom Anya had unlocked in him. The transformation was not lost on the people of the spire. The servants no longer averted their eyes in fear. The guards smiled. They saw a king who was whole, and a queen whose quiet strength was the foundation of their new peace. The wolfless Omega, the discarded tribute, was becoming the heart of the kingdom. 1 year later, the great glass ceiling of the royal greenhouse shimmered in the morning sun. What was once a graveyard of dead plants was now a lush, vibrant paradise, a riot of color and life that spilled out into newly cultivated gardens surrounding the obsidian spire. The air, once sharp with the scent of sulfur, was now sweet with the fragrance of 1,000 different blossoms. Anya, queen of the northern wastes, walked through the aisles, her hand trailing over the soft petals of a silver rose. She wore a simple but elegant gown of forest green, and a small, delicate silver circlet rested on her brow, the only crown she ever consented to wear. Her belly was swollen, round with the promise of new life. The kingdom's healers had been shocked. The union of a wolfless Omega and a cursed king was not supposed to produce an heir, but their bond, forged in magic and love, had defied all expectations. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and a familiar, beloved scent of pine and shadow filled her senses. Ronan rested his chin on her shoulder, his hands coming to rest protectively on her stomach. "Checking on your children again?" he murmured, his voice a low, happy rumble against her ear. He no longer meant the plants. Anya smiled, leaning back against his solid warmth. "They are all my children. The leafy ones and the kicking one." She felt a flutter from within and placed her hand over his. "He is strong today." "He is his mother's son," Ronan said with pride, "and his father's. Let's hope he gets your temperament and my appreciation for your temperament." She laughed, a sound that was free and easy. It had been a year of profound change. Under their joint rule, the kingdom was thriving. The old, brutal ways were slowly being replaced by a culture that valued more than just martial strength. Trade routes were opened, old feuds were settled through mediation instead of bloodshed, and Anya's healers, trained in the spire, were now esteemed members of every pack. Even her own former pack, the Dustfang, had sent a delegation to beg forgiveness and learn her ways, their Alpha Gregor having been deposed in favor of a younger, wiser leader. Her sister, Seraphina, was now a frequent and welcome visitor, their bond repaired and stronger than ever. The Shadow Beast was still a part of Ronan, a well of power he could draw on when needed. He was the most powerful king the Wastes had ever known, but his strength was now tempered by Anya's compassion. He was a protector, not a conqueror. Gideon sent word from the sun-scorched plains, Ronan said, his tone more serious. The irrigation channels you designed are working. They have a true harvest for the first time in a generation. Anya felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Good. No one should go hungry. He turned her in his arms, his silver eyes, now always clear and full of love, gazing down at her. You have healed my kingdom, Anya. You healed me. We healed each other, she corrected him softly, reaching up to trace the line of his strong jaw. You taught me I was not worthless. You saw strength in me when all I saw was weakness. I saw my mate, he said simply, as if it were the only explanation that ever mattered. He bent his head and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss full of the quiet comfort of a shared life, a shared soul. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms amidst the life they had built together, a tiny, perfect moon petal, growing in a pot near the entrance, unfurled its first glowing blossom. It was a new bloom, from a new seed, in a garden reborn. A symbol of their love, their reign, and the enduring magic of finding strength not in what makes one feared, but in what makes one whole. The rejected Omega and the cursed King had found their sanctuary, and in doing so, had given one to the entire world.